Um, Almost half of the adults in this country believe that, hiding a secret credit card from the person you are building a life with is just as bad, or actually, in some cases, significantly worse than having a physical affair. Let that just sort of sit with you for a moment.
Yeah, it is a really heavy realization.
Right. Because we operate in a culture that treats romance and finance as if they belong in like completely different universes. I mean, you don't bring up your FICO score on a first date.
Oh, definitely not.
And you certainly don't bring up, your student loan debt while picking out the venue for this beautiful wedding. You were supposed to be daydreaming about committing to a shared life. It's supposed to be joyful.
Exactly. It's the honeymoon phase.
But underneath the surface of that incredibly idealized phase, one person might be carrying this crushing, silent burden. Like maybe it's a massive family financial obligation they haven't mentioned, or just a history of really crippling debt.
And the most heartbreaking part of that is they usually aren't hiding it out of malice.
No, not at all. They aren't trying to trap anyone. They are hiding it out of a sheer paralyzing sense of shame.
The psychology of that shame is profoundly isolating, honestly. When you look at the behavioral data, people will go to astonishing lengths to preserve this specific image of themselves that they believe their partner fell in love with.
Right. The idealized version.
Exactly. If they perceive that their partner fell in love with this highly competent, self-sufficient, successful individual, admitting to a mountain of consumer debt feels like confessing to a fundamental personality flaw.
Like they're an imposter.
Yes. They convince themselves that the financial reality would shatter the romantic reality, so they compartmentalize it. They build a wall around the money to protect the love, completely misunderstanding that the wall itself is what will eventually, starve the relationship of trust.
Wow, yeah. Welcome to the deep dive in the AI Dialogue Lab. Today, we are pulling from a massive stack of research, so consumer psychology studies, financial industry surveys, sociological data on family structures, to answer a core question that genuinely makes most people sweat.
It really is.
Should couples talk about money before marriage? Or is avoiding the topic actually more dangerous? To you, the listener, we know exactly how this sounds.
We're a total romance killer.
Exactly. Bringing up balance sheets and credit utilization rates over a candlelit dinner feels so clinical. It feels like you are stripping the magic out of the room and turning this profound emotional commitment into like a cold corporate merger.
We have a deep cultural aversion to mixing the language of love with the language of commerce. We really want to believe that love conquers all, including compound interest.
If only.
Right. But the reality is that long-term partnerships function on two parallel tracks. There's the emotional bond, and there's the economic partnership. When we ignore the economic track, we aren't being romantic. We are simply operating with a massive blind spot.
Which brings us to the data.
Yes. The data we are looking at today reveals a stark truth. The couples who actually thrive over decades aren't necessarily the ones with the highest net worth.
Or the ones who never have money problems.
Exactly. They are the ones who have developed the psychological safety to align their realities, however messy and imperfect those realities happen to be.
And that concept right there, psychological safety, is where we really need to begin. Because the instinctive human reaction is to avoid this friction at all costs.
Avoidance is the default setting for most of us.
Right. So to understand how to navigate these conversations, we first have to understand the powerful forces keeping our mouths shut. We are looking at this illusion of harmony versus the actual compounding cost of silence. The research points to a very specific, overwhelming culprit for why intelligent, deeply committed people avoid talking about money, and that culprit is chronic stress.
Chronic stress changes everything about how we operate. The Cornell Chronicle published research that sheds a really harsh light on this. They found that 70% of Americans experience financial stress.
70%. That is wild.
It is a staggering supermajority of the population walking around with a baseline level of anxiety about their financial survival or their identity. And this isn't just a fleeting worry, it's a chronic state.
Like just constantly feeling overwhelmed by spending.
Yes, struggling to manage daily obligations and harboring this pervasive fear of the future. When you have 70% of a population operating under that kind of cognitive load, it fundamentally alters how they interact with the people closest to them.
And the paradox here is fascinating to me because conventional wisdom suggests that if you are stressed, you turn to your partner for support, right?
You would think so.
You vent, you ask for help, you lean on them. But the Cornell study, which was published in the Journal of Consumer Psychology, by the way, reveals the exact opposite behavior when the stress is related to money.
Completely the opposite.
When people are financially stressed, they communicate less with their partners about it, they withdraw entirely.
They withdraw because of how chronic stress depletes our executive functioning. Researchers like Suzanne Shu and Emily Garbinski explored this exact psychological mechanism.
And what did they find?
Well, when you are financially stressed, your cognitive resources are constantly being taxed, just trying to keep your head above water. By the time you sit down with your partner at the end of the day, you are emotionally and mentally exhausted.
Your tank is just empty.
Completely empty. And because of that depletion, you lose the ability to view a financial problem as a puzzle that a team can solve. Instead, you view it as this perpetual, unsolvable conflict.
So you look at the credit card bill and think, if I bring this up, we are just going to fight.
Exactly. We're going to fight, nothing is going to fundamentally change, and we'll just ruin the evening.
So the avoidance isn't necessarily born from a desire to deceive someone. It's a misguided attempt at conflict management. You're basically thinking, I am protecting our peace.
Yes, protecting our peace is the exact phrase people use to justify it.
It reminds me of a behavioral economics concept where people discount the future to preserve the present. It's like, okay, imagine hearing a very distinct, really aggressive grinding noise in your car's engine while you're driving down the highway.
Oh, that's the worst feeling.
The logical move is to pull over, open the hood, and diagnose the problem. But that's stressful, right?
It's incredibly stressful.
It might mean a massive repair bill. It might mean your road trip is totally ruined. So instead of pulling over, you just reach out and turn the radio up.
Just drown it out.
Exactly. The noise technically disappears from your immediate consciousness. The cabin is peaceful again. You can focus on the scenery. But the engine is still destroying itself. By preserving that short-term acoustic comfort, you're guaranteeing a catastrophic, much more expensive breakdown just a few miles down the road.
That captures the dynamic perfectly. In a relationship, turning up the radio looks like throwing yourself into wedding planning or focusing intensely on planning the honeymoon or just sticking to surface-level conversations.
You're trading the long-term stability for a pleasant Tuesday evening.
And the statistical fallout of this avoidance is just alarming. The data from Western and Southern Financial Group, which surveyed married and divorced Americans, shows that 21% of married Americans have never, not even once, discussed debt with their spouse.
I'm sorry, 21%. That statistic is genuinely hard to process. More than 1 in 5 married couples are operating in a complete vacuum regarding what they owe.
A total vacuum.
They are legally bound to each other, often carrying joint liability depending on the state they live in, and they have zero idea what the other person's balance sheet looks like.
Furthermore, the same data set reveals that over a quarter, 27%, wait until after they are married to bring it up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they secure the emotional and legal commitment first, effectively locking the other person in, and only then do they allow the financial reality to surface. It is a profound deferral of reality.
Okay, I want to push back on this a little bit, playing devil's advocate for the people listening who really value the romance of a relationship's early stages.
Sure, go for it.
When you are falling in love, there is a natural, almost biological imperative to present your best self. You want to be a source of joy for this person, not a source of stress. So is it really so terrible to want to protect that honeymoon phase?
I hear that a lot.
I mean, does everything have to be audited before you say, I do? Isn't there some value in trusting that whatever comes up, you'll figure it out together later?
The desire to protect the honeymoon phase is incredibly human, I'll give you that. But the problem lies in the physics of financial risk. Silence does not freeze time, and it certainly does not freeze interest rates.
Right, the math keeps mathing.
Exactly. When you avoid the conversation, you aren't actually protecting the relationship. You are merely delaying the introduction of the risk. And while you delay, that risk compounds. Unaddressed debt grows. But more importantly, unspoken expectations solidify into concrete assumptions.
What do you mean by concrete assumptions?
Let's say one partner is living really frugally, assuming that every extra dollar is going toward a down payment on a house in 5 years. The other partner, operating without a shared financial map, assumes their combined income means they can finally afford to travel internationally twice a year.
Oh man, 2 completely different playbooks.
Exactly. That short-term harmony you are fiercely protecting is entirely fabricated. It's a hologram. When the hologram eventually slickers out, when the lease is up and it's time to buy the house, the resulting conflict isn't just about the money.
It's about the realization that you have been living in two different realities.
Yes. The betrayal isn't necessarily that there isn't enough money for the house. The betrayal is that you let me believe we were walking in the same direction for years when we weren't.
The silence we view as a shield is actually just a ticking clock. So, if we accept that turning up the radio is a disastrous strategy and that we actually have to confront the engine noise, we need to get very specific about what we are looking for under the hood.
Right. What actually matters?
And the immense relief for you, the listener, is that the goal of this disclosure is not perfection.
That is a critical distinction to make early on. The objective of premarital financial disclosure is not to walk into the living room, drop a pristine 800 credit score and a massive investment portfolio on the table, and demand that your partner produce the same.
If perfection were the prerequisite for marriage, the institution would collapse overnight.
It absolutely would. The actual goal is the comprehensive disclosure of obligations that will materially affect your shared life. It is about taking inventory of the terrain before you agree to hike together, so you know whether you need to pack hiking boots or climbing gear.
Let's map out that terrain then. Based on insights from Morgan Stanley and standard prenuptial financial checklists, there are specific non-negotiable categories that need to be illuminated. We're looking at existing debt, obviously.
Yeah, all of it.
We are looking at credit health because that dictates your collective borrowing power. We are looking at income volatility, and we are looking at baseline spending and saving behaviors.
Income volatility is a particularly nuanced one that often gets overlooked in favor of just looking at the top-line salary number.
Yeah, explain that because I think a lot of people just ask, what do you make? And stop there.
Right. Consider a scenario where one partner is a tenured teacher. They have a predictable, steady, bi-weekly paycheck that arrives like clockwork. The other partner is a freelance software developer or a real estate agent.
Very different cash flows.
Their annual income might actually be higher than the teacher's, but it arrives in unpredictable, massive spikes followed by months of drought. That volatility isn't a moral failing, and it certainly isn't a deal breaker for a marriage, but it fundamentally alters the mechanics of how that household must budget.
If the teacher assumes they can rely on the freelancer's income for the fixed monthly mortgage, the stress during a drought month will be immense.
Exactly. The mechanics of the household have to match the reality of the income.
And that brings us to spending behaviors, which are deeply ingrained and highly emotional. Morgan Stanley suggests a fantastic, non-threatening diagnostic question to ask your partner. If you unexpectedly received a gift of $10,000 tomorrow, exactly how would you allocate it?
I love that question.
It's a brilliant hypothetical because it bypasses the defense mechanisms associated with their current debt or current salary, and it reveals their raw financial instinct, their money DNA.
It strips away the current stress and just looks at values.
Right. Would they immediately put it in a high-yield savings account? Would they book a luxury vacation because they value experiences over security? Would they pay down a lingering car loan? It tells you what their default setting is.
But beyond income and spending defaults, the most complex, the most emotionally charged, and frankly, the most frequently hidden category of financial disclosure is family obligation.
Yes, this is huge.
It is a massive blind spot for many couples. It often goes entirely unspoken until a crisis forces it into the light. The research from the Ministry of Social and Family Development provides a vital framework for understanding this, specifically focusing on what is known as the sandwich generation.
The sandwich generation. This is a demographic reality that is quietly reshaping the financial architecture of millions of families. We are talking about adults, typically falling between the ages of 35 and 59, who find themselves caught in a vice.
A very tight vice.
They are simultaneously carrying the intense financial and physical load of raising their own growing children while also absorbing the escalating needs of their aging parents.
And the term sandwiched almost trivializes the weight of what these individuals actually carry. The MSF research points out that this obligation is multifaceted. It is financial, yes, paying for parents' prescriptions, contributing to their rent, or covering the astronomical costs of memory care or assisted living.
Which can bankrupt a family on its own.
Easily. But it is also intensely physical and psychosocial. It is the heavy lifting of chronic care. It means spending your weekends driving to medical specialists, navigating insurance bureaucracy on behalf of someone with declining cognitive function, or physically retrofitting your home to accommodate a wheelchair.
The MSF piece uses a phrase that really stuck with me. They explicitly state that being part of the sandwich generation requires getting used to a messy life.
A very messy life.
The tidy linear financial plan you created in your 20s just goes out the window. Your finances won't be pristine. Your time will absolutely not be your own. The emotional bandwidth you have available for your romantic partner will be severely compromised at times.
Without a doubt.
So if I am sitting across from someone contemplating marriage, I have to look beyond the person in front of me. I have to ask myself, am I just marrying this individual, or am I also financially and emotionally marrying their parents' retirement deficit, their siblings' chronic unemployment, and their family's cultural expectations?
You are marrying the entire ecosystem, which is why radical disclosure is paramount. And we have to acknowledge that the expectations surrounding family support are not universal. They are deeply cultural.
Let's dig into that because the cultural aspect is fascinating.
In highly individualistic cultures, the expectation might be that parents are responsible for their own retirement and adult children are focused solely on their nuclear family.
Right, that you're on your own once you're 18 mentality.
Yes. But in many collectivist cultures, the fundamental ethos is that the family is the first, last, and only reliable line of defense. The expectation that you will financially backstop your parents as they age is not a discussion. It is a given.
It's just understood.
Exactly. If you enter a marriage operating under the individualistic assumption that your joint income is exclusively for your own children, and your partner is operating under the collectivist assumption that 15% of their income will always be sent to their parents, you are on a catastrophic collision course.
I want to pause here and speak directly to you, the listener, because the sheer weight of these obligations can feel overwhelming. There is absolutely no shame in any of the realities we just discussed.
None at all.
There is no shame in carrying a massive student loan balance for a degree that allowed you to break into your field. There's no shame in having a lower baseline income because you chose a career in public service over corporate finance. And there is profound honor, not shame, in participating in a cultural norm where you sacrifice to support the parents who raised you.
That is the texture of real life.
Exactly. The danger is not the existence of the obligation. The danger is whether your partner knows what they are signing up for.
A team can accomplish remarkable things. A united couple can systematically dismantle a mountain of debt over a decade. A united couple can navigate the grueling, exhausting realities of being the sandwich generation with grace and resilience.
At least they're doing it together.
But what a team absolutely cannot do is effectively navigate an obstacle course while one partner is wearing a blindfold. Disclosure is the act of removing the blindfold.
So we have established the underlying anxiety that causes us to avoid the conversation, and we've mapped out the specific terrain, the debts, the volatility, the familial obligations that we actually need to illuminate. Now, we have to transition into the darker territory of this deep dive.
The really tough stuff.
What happens when the avoidance metastasizes? What happens when a partner moves beyond simply delaying a stressful conversation and begins actively constructing a false reality? We are entering the realm of financial infidelity and the profound psychological betrayal of secrecy.
When avoidance turns into active concealment, the damage to the relationship becomes acute, and frankly, it is incredibly widespread. A comprehensive survey conducted by Bankrate provides a very clear, very unsettling picture of the modern relationship landscape.
What did they find?
They found that 40% of U.S. adults who are married, in a civil partnership or living with a romantic partner, admit to having committed financial infidelity.
40%. 2 out of every 5 cohabiting couples are operating with some level of active financial deception. That is a staggering frequency.
It really is.
And how exactly does the survey define this infidelity? Because we need to differentiate between forgetting to mention a $20 lunch and actively hiding assets.
The survey defines financial infidelity through significant, deliberate actions. It includes consistently spending more than a partner would be comfortable with and hiding the evidence. It includes carrying secret, undisclosed debt.
The hidden credit card.
Exactly. It includes hiding active credit cards or stealthily stashing money away in secret checking or savings accounts that the partner has no idea exist. It is the intentional curation of a false financial narrative.
When you dig into the demographics of that 40%, the data throws a massive curveball. You would logically assume that older generations, people who have had decades to accumulate complex assets, navigate multiple careers, perhaps go through a previous divorce, would be the ones with the highest rates of hidden counts.
That would be the logical assumption, yes.
But the Bankrate data shows the exact opposite. Gen Z is by far the most likely to commit financial infidelity, with a staggering 67% admitting to it.
That 67% figure is incredibly telling. And it forces us to look at the structural environment of how different generations manage their lives. Why is Gen Z so prone to this?
Right. What's driving that specific generation?
The analysis suggests it is deeply intertwined with their broader financial philosophy. Gen Z is a generation that witnessed the financial devastation of the 2008 recession during their formative years.
They saw their parents lose homes.
Yes, they have grown up in a hyper-individualized gig economy. Consequently, they are fiercely protective of their financial autonomy. Nearly 9 out of 10 Gen Zers in live-in relationships keep at least some of their money entirely separate from their partner.
Now, to be clear, keeping separate accounts is not inherently bad or malicious. As we'll discuss a little later, it is a very common and often healthy structural choice. But the mechanical reality is that separate accounts create an environment where secrecy requires zero effort.
Zero effort at all.
If all your money goes into a joint account, a hidden $500 monthly payment to a secret credit card is a glaring anomaly that requires explanation. But if your income goes into a private account and you just transfer your half of the rent to a shared account, a mountain of secret debt or a massive secret savings fund can exist in plain sight, completely undetected.
The architecture of their banking facilitates the ease of the infidelity.
But the ease of the act does not mitigate the severity of the emotional fallout. The perceived betrayal of financial infidelity is immense. The data shows that 45% of U.S. adults believe that keeping financial secrets from a partner is just as bad as, or even worse than, a physical affair.
You have nearly half the population equating a secret savings account or a hidden credit card bill with sexual infidelity. The Western and Southern data corroborates this intensity, revealing that 40% of people consider financial dishonesty to be an absolute, non-negotiable deal breaker that would trigger the end of the relationship.
This is the crux of the issue. Why does a hidden bank account feel like a knife to the chest? Why does it register on the same emotional Richter scale as a physical affair? Because on paper, it's just numbers on a screen.
To truly understand the architecture of this betrayal, we have to look at a brilliant 2025 study by researchers Nikolova, Olson, and Gladstone. They introduced a concept that completely reframes how we view money in relationships: financial infidelity asymmetry.
Asymmetry, explain that.
The concept of asymmetry is vital because the researchers didn't just look at the individual who was hiding the money. They analyzed the couple as an interdependent unit. Financial infidelity asymmetry measures the gap, the degree of difference between the two partners' tendencies to hide financial information.
Okay, so looking at the dynamic between them.
Right. If you have a couple where both partners are highly secretive, they both have hidden accounts, they both lie about their spending, that is a highly dysfunctional relationship, but it is symmetrical.
They're both playing the same dysfunctional game.
Yes. If both partners are completely transparent, that is also symmetrical, just at the healthy end of the spectrum. The danger zone is the asymmetry. When one partner is operating as a completely open book and the other partner is highly secretive.
Let's visualize how this plays out in a real living room. You have one partner who is laying every single card on the table. They are bringing their W-2s, they are showing their student loan balances, they are painstakingly building a 5-year projection on a spreadsheet. They are saying, okay, if we save this much, we can afford to have a child in 3 years.
Building a shared dream.
And the other partner is sitting across from them, nodding in agreement, validating the spreadsheet, while secretly funneling hundreds of dollars a month into an undisclosed account, or quietly suffocating under a high-interest secret debt that will inevitably detonate that 5-year plan.
And this is exactly the core mechanism that the Nikolova study identified as the ultimate relationship killer. The asymmetry leads directly to the creation of individualized financial goals, completely severing the concept of shared financial goals.
It's the death of the team.
That invisible separation of agendas is what directly predicts lower relationship satisfaction and decreased overall financial well-being for the household.
The real danger of financial infidelity isn't just the mathematical reality that you owe an extra $10,000 to Visa. The devastating danger is that the transparent partner is planning a shared future, a home purchase, a career change, a retirement timeline, based on a completely fictional set of data provided by the person they trust more than anyone else in the world.
Based on a lie.
The secretive partner is unilaterally making decisions that alter the trajectory of a life that belongs to both of them.
It is a profound breach of agency. A long-term committed partnership is the ultimate interdependent ecosystem. You are co-authoring a reality. When one person introduces financial secrecy, they are essentially stealing the other person's ability to give informed consent to the life they're living.
Stealing their informed consent, that is a powerful way to frame it.
The transparent partner is making massive life choices, maybe deciding to take a lower-paying, more fulfilling job because they believe their joint debt is zero based on an illusion. The betrayal is so visceral because it reveals that you are not, in fact, playing on the same team. You're playing two entirely different games.
Which perfectly explains why the Nikolova study found that couples demonstrating symmetry and transparency, where both partners are open books, have vastly superior outcomes across every measurable metric.
Across the board.
They experience higher financial well-being, they report deeper relationship satisfaction, and they actually achieve their shared goals because they're actually working toward the same finish line.
That transparency is the prerequisite for interdependence. You cannot support a partner through a crisis you don't know exists, and you cannot build a reliable future on a foundation of withheld truths.
So we have painted a very stark picture. We know avoiding the conversation guarantees future conflict. We know that actively hiding the truth destroys the foundational trust of the relationship. But this brings us to a massive, imposing, practical hurdle.
How do we actually do it?
Exactly. If secrecy destroys trust, how do we actually execute these conversations without triggering a catastrophic emotional reaction? If you walk into the kitchen tonight and say to your partner, "I need you to show me your credit card statements and your credit score right now," you aren't going to get transparency.
You are going to get a fight.
You are going to trigger every single psychological defense mechanism they possess. They will feel interrogated, judged, and controlled.
Approaching it like an audit is a guaranteed failure. You have to actively de-shame the environment before you can examine the numbers. To figure out how to do this, we can actually look outside the realm of couples therapy and look at the research on debt collection and vulnerability.
Debt collection, that's interesting.
Yes. The University of Bristol published extensive guidelines on how financial professionals should interact with people in deep, overwhelming financial distress without causing further psychological harm. The core principles they identified, removing moral judgment and focusing on actionable reality, can be brilliantly adapted for romantic partnerships.
We can synthesize those principles into a less shame-based four-step protocol for couples. Step 1, start with the facts. Step 2, move to the context. Step 3, explore the underlying anxieties. And step 4, agree on one singular, repairable next step.
Let's examine step 1, starting with facts. The goal here is to completely decouple the mathematical reality from moral judgment. A $15,000 credit card balance is not a character flaw.
It's just data.
It is not an indictment of your worth as a human being. It is simply a math problem. When we inject moral outrage into the numbers, we trigger the shame spiral that leads right back to secrecy.
The analogy I use for this is thinking about how a doctor looks at an x-ray. If you fall off a ladder and go to the emergency room with a broken arm, the doctor puts the film up on the light board and looks at the jagged broken bone.
Right.
The doctor doesn't turn to you and say, "Wow, you are so incredibly irresponsible for breaking your arm. What a moral failure. I can't believe you did this."
That would be absurd.
Completely absurd. The doctor is emotionally neutral. They say, "Okay, I see a fracture on the radius. Here is how we were going to set the bone, and here's the cast we are going to use." The doctor is only looking at the facts so they can engineer a solution.
Financial transparency in a relationship must be approached with that exact same clinical neutrality. It is about diagnosing the terrain so the team can navigate it. It is absolutely not about establishing a dynamic of surveillance or control over a partner.
The clinical neutrality is what makes step 2 possible. Moving to the context. Once the numbers are on the table without judgment, you have to understand the why behind them. This is where Morgan Stanley's concept of money DNA becomes a profound tool for empathy.
Your money DNA is the complex web of beliefs, fears, and habits you developed, usually during childhood, regarding how money functions in the world. You have to ask your partner, what was the financial atmosphere like in your house growing up? How did your parents talk about money?
This exploration of context is where the breakthrough usually happens. If you sit down and discover that your partner grew up in a household where money was weaponized, where the primary breadwinner used financial control to dominate the family, or where there was constant terrifying scarcity and the power was always getting shut off, it suddenly makes perfect logical sense why they might be a financial avoider.
Absolutely.
To them, opening a bank statement isn't a chore, it's a trigger for childhood trauma. Or, conversely, if they grew up with a parent who chronically squandered money and left the family in ruin, they might be incredibly tight-fisted, viewing any discretionary spending as a threat to their survival.
By exploring that money DNA, you fundamentally shift the dynamic. You move from an accusatory stance, why are you so financially irresponsible,
Mhm.
to an empathetic stance, I finally understand why dealing with this credit card bill causes you so much panic.
It breeds deep empathy.
Empathy, which diffuses the shame.
And once that empathy is established, you move to step 3, exploring the anxieties. This is about looking forward. You ask, when you think about our finances, what is the nightmare scenario keeping you awake? Are you terrified we will never be able to retire? Are you paralyzed by the fear that you won't be able to pay for your parents' medical care?
You bring the invisible monsters out from under the bed.
And then finally, step 4. You agree on one repairable next step.
The restraint in step 4 is crucial. You do not attempt to solve a decade of financial mismanagement in one emotional conversation. You don't try to draft a comprehensive 20-year retirement plan that night.
That would just be overwhelming.
You agree on one micro-action. Let's commit to sitting down for 10 minutes on the first Sunday of every month just to look at the joint checking account. Or, let's commit to calling the student loan provider this week to understand the interest rate. You build a small, undeniable victory.
To make this incredibly practical for the listener, we can offer a specific script. If you know you need to have this conversation, but you are terrified of your partner's reaction, you can open with this. I am bringing this up not because I want to judge you and not because I want to control you. I'm asking because if we are going to build a life together, I want us to face the real numbers as a team.
The phrasing there is deeply intentional. Face the real numbers as a team. It physically and psychologically reorients the relationship. Instead of sitting face-to-face across a table, attacking each other over a spreadsheet, it positions you side by side, shoulder to shoulder, looking outward at the problem together.
It is incredibly disarming. Making space for past mistakes, allowing someone to reveal a past bankruptcy or a current mountain of consumer debt without the threat of you immediately walking out the door, vaporizes the need for secrecy. But we must issue a very clear caveat here.
Yes, this is important.
The reaction you get to this gentle, de-shamed approach is critical data. If you use that script, if you are genuinely calm, empathetic, and non-judgmental, and your partner still reacts with intense hostility, wait, I shouldn't say still. If they react by outright refusing all discussion, if their story about where their money goes constantly changes, or if they attempt to turn it around and use money as a mechanism to control your behavior, those are massive, blinking red flags.
Absolutely. The protocol is designed to neutralize panic and dismantle shame in a healthy partner. But if your invitation to transparency is met with gaslighting, manipulation, or aggressive defensiveness, that is not a sign that you used the wrong script. It is a profound indicator of their character and their capacity for partnership.
That is vital information you must process before you legally bind your financial future to theirs.
Exactly.
So let's assume the best case scenario. You use the protocol. You look at the financial x-rays together without judgment. You explore your respective money DNA. You get all the debts and obligations out in the open. You survive the vulnerability of the conversation. Your trust deepens, and you get married.
A happy ending.
The wedding is beautiful. Now it's Tuesday morning. What does the operational day-to-day reality of a shared financial life actually look like? There is a pervasive, almost suffocating assumption that getting married means you must immediately dump every single penny you both earn into one giant, terrifying joint checking account, obliterating your financial autonomy.
That assumption is a relic of a different economic era, and it is entirely false. Total financial fusion is not a prerequisite for a healthy, transparent marriage. In fact, the behavioral data from Bankrate indicates that 62% of adults living with a romantic partner keep at least some portion of their money entirely separate.
62%.
Yes. This is widely known as the yours, mine, and ours approach, and it allows couples to maintain a degree of individual agency while fully funding their shared life.
I think hearing that 62% statistic is a massive exhale for people who deeply value their independence. You can absolutely build a shared life without having to ask your spouse for permission to buy a $4 coffee or a new book.
Right. It avoids that parent-child dynamic.
But this creates a mechanical problem. If you don't throw everything into one pot, how do you determine what is fair? Because the default answer is usually, we will just split the bills 50-50. And 50-50 sounds perfectly equitable until you realize that one partner makes $150,000 a year and the other partner makes $50,000 a year.
Right.
A 50-50 split in that scenario means one partner is living in luxury while the other is constantly bordering on insolvency, just trying to pay for half the mortgage.
That is exactly the friction point. Equal math does not always result in an equitable reality. To solve this, couples need a defined framework. We can examine the models popularized by tools like the cash and crush calculators, which offer structural alternatives to the rigid 50-50 split. These frameworks force couples to define what fairness actually means within the context of their specific relationship.
Let's thoroughly explore these frameworks because they offer a lifeline to couples struggling with income disparity. The first and perhaps most common alternative is the proportional splitting model.
The proportional model is anchored to income ratios. You calculate total household income and then determine what percentage each partner contributes to that total. If partner A earns 70% of the total income and partner B earns 30%, then partner A is responsible for paying 70% of the shared household expenses, the rent, the utilities, the groceries, and partner B pays 30%.
It's mathematically sound based on capacity.
Exactly. It acknowledges the reality of different earning power. It ensures that both partners are contributing to the survival of the household, but the burden is distributed according to their capacity to carry it.
It prevents the lower earner from being crushed by the lifestyle choices of the higher earner. But then we have the second framework, the equal allowance model. This one is philosophically fascinating because it entirely inverts the traditional logic of how we view earned income.
The equal allowance model shifts the focus from the input to the outcome. In this model, all income, regardless of who earned it, is pooled to pay the shared household bills and fund shared savings goals.
Everything goes into the center.
Yes, and once all the obligations are met, whatever discretionary money is left over is divided exactly in half, giving each partner an equal allowance or fund money. The philosophy here is that both partners are contributing 100% of their effort to the marriage, whether that effort is in a high-paying corporate job or a lower-paying socially valuable job, and therefore both partners deserve the exact same quality of life and discretionary freedom.
But wait, I have to challenge this model a bit.
Sure, go ahead.
Because while it sounds beautiful in theory, it kind of pushes hard against human nature, especially in our society.
Right, the capitalist mindset.
Exactly. Like, let's say partner A works 80 brutal hours a week in a high-stress job, right? And partner B chooses to work maybe 20 hours a week as a consultant to have more free time.
Okay, I see where you're going.
If they pool everything and get the exact same allowance, isn't partner A basically guaranteed to harbor some deep resentment over time? They might feel like their intense labor is subsidizing the other person's leisure.
That is the precise vulnerability of the equal allowance model and why these frameworks must be chosen carefully. The equal allowance model generally only survives in reality if both partners feel that their overall contribution to the household, including unseen labor like child rearing, managing the home, or supporting the other's career, is relatively equal, even if the financial compensation is wildly different.
So it requires a deep consensus on value.
Yes. If there's a perceived imbalance in effort, the equal allowance model will rapidly breed resentment. Which brings us to the third framework, the debt-adjusted splitting model, which attempts to account for the burdens people bring into the marriage.
So this one feels highly relevant to millennials and Gen Z.
It is. The debt-adjusted model looks at your actual disposable income rather than your gross salary. It requires calculating the mandatory individual debt payments, like massive student loans or significant car loan acquired before the relationship, before determining the ratio for splitting household bills.
So it changes the math before the split even happens.
Right. If you have two partners making the same salary, but one has a $1,000 monthly student loan payment and the other is debt-free, treating them as if they have the exact same capacity to pay the rent is mathematically flawed. This model adjusts the required household contribution down for the partner carrying the heavy debt burden, so they aren't suffocated.
The ultimate takeaway for you, the listener, is not that one of these mathematical models is inherently superior to the others. The crucial element is the existence of the framework itself. You are choosing a defined system based on your shared values, rather than just guessing, drifting, and quietly resenting each other at the end of every month.
And the mathematical framework must be supported by an operational framework. The research points to two indispensable practices for maintaining financial hygiene in a marriage. The first is instituting a recurring money meeting.
A money meeting.
This is not an emergency summit convened because an account was overdrawn. It is a scheduled routine check-in, perhaps quarterly, to look at the system. You review the budget, you track progress towards shared goals, and you adjust the math if one partner got a raise or if a new expense arose.
It functions like a quarterly earnings call or a State of the Union address for your household. Are our assumptions still correct? Do we need to increase the grocery budget because of inflation? It takes the emotion out of the adjustment.
Exactly. And the second vital operational practice is establishing a pre-agreed threshold for disclosing major financial decisions.
Yes, let's talk about the threshold.
This is a very simple binary rule agreed upon in advance. For example, we mutually agree that we will consult each other before making any unilateral purchase over $500.
I have to pause and clarify the psychology of this for the listener because the language of thresholds and consulting can cause some people to bristle. Setting a spending threshold is absolutely not about asking your partner for an allowance as if you are a teenager.
Definitely not.
It is not about asking for permission to spend money you earned. It is about recognizing that you are now acting as co-CEOs of a shared enterprise. If you own a business with a partner, you do not unilaterally drain the corporate account to buy a new $5,000 server without giving your partner a heads up.
That would be disastrous.
Doing so wouldn't just be rude, it would jeopardize the stability of the entire venture. The threshold in a marriage is about basic respect for the joint venture. It's about ensuring that a spontaneous decision by one CEO doesn't bounce the mortgage check for both of them.
That distinction between communication and control is the bedrock of a healthy financial partnership. And the data overwhelmingly validates this structured communicative approach. Returning to the Western and Southern survey, they uncovered a statistic that is almost unheard of in relationship research.
Get me.
Couples who entered their current marriage with a formal, agreed-upon financial plan reported a 94% marital satisfaction rate.
A 94% satisfaction rate. That is an astonishing level of reported happiness. It completely shatters the myth that analyzing spreadsheets and discussing debt destroys the romance of a relationship. It proves the exact opposite. Tackling the unromantic reality actually secures the romance.
It secures it because it builds an unshakable foundation of trust. Couples who confront the discomfort, who understand each other's money DNA, who disclose their hidden obligations and who operate within a transparent framework are fundamentally better equipped to survive life's inevitable tragedies.
Because life will happen.
Always. When the roof literally caves in, when an entire industry shifts and a job is lost, or when an aging parent suddenly requires full-time care, they only have to fight the practical crisis. They do not have to simultaneously fight the emotional crisis of betrayal and hidden debts. They can face the external storm as a unified front.
Which brings this entire deep dive full circle. We have traversed some incredibly complex, often uncomfortable terrain today. We began by dismantling the illusion of harmony, looking at how the very human instinct to avoid the stress of the money talk, turning up the radio to ignore the grinding engine, only guarantees a more devastating breakdown in the future.
We examined the vital necessity of mapping the terrain. We clarified that the goal is never financial perfection, but rather the honest disclosure of the obligations that will shape your shared reality, the consumer debt, the income volatility, and the profound, often invisible weight of family support carried by the sandwich generation.
We confronted the psychological devastation of financial infidelity, looking closely at how the asymmetry of secrecy forces couples to abandon shared goals and construct individualized, fundamentally incompatible futures. We recognize that the betrayal is not just about the hidden dollars, it is about stealing your partner's agency.
But we also outlined the architecture of repair. We discussed how to dismantle the paralyzing power of shame, using clinical neutrality and empathy for our partner's money DNA. And finally, we established that a shared life does not demand the erasure of financial autonomy. By utilizing frameworks like proportional splitting and setting clear disclosure thresholds, couples can act as co-CEOs of a thriving, transparent enterprise.
It is a journey that moves a couple from isolated anxiety to powerful teamwork. This isn't a magic bullet. There will still be disagreements about money, but it changes the nature of the disagreement from a battle over trust to a negotiation over tactics. As we close this out, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to mull over as you move through your week.
It's an important one.
Think deeply about the difficult conversations you are actively avoiding right now in your own life. Think about that clanking noise you are desperately trying to ignore by turning up the radio. Ask yourself a very hard question. Are you truly avoiding those conversations to protect the health of your relationship, or are you actually just avoiding them to protect yourself from momentary discomfort?
It is a confronting question, but answering it honestly is the prerequisite for a mature partnership. Genuine growth, both personal and relational, very rarely occurs within the boundaries of our comfort zone. It requires stepping into the friction.
Exactly. We have to face the friction. Because love does not require perfect finances, but it does require that your partner is not surprised after marriage by risks you will both carry.